And now we have bells. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a cold January morning after a snowstorm. I hope everyone got some rest yesterday from their snow day. I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting will be held on Tuesday, January 11th at 7:30 p.m. in the board meeting room. Thank you. I'd just like to start out and extend our thoughts and our prayers to Daniel and Jennifer Record on the loss of their son, Nathan Record. They are two incredible people that are part of our community here in the district. So our thoughts and prayers are with you on the loss of Nathan. I'd also like to take a moment and also extend our thoughts and prayers to the Balkind family on their loss of their son, Teddy. So if we could just take a moment. Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you for the few of you that have joined us here this morning. I know we've got a lot of people on Zoom and we've got a process in place that should work. I'd also like to just start out and thank Dr. Adley, the administrative team, principals, assistant principals, and teachers. It is a monumental task over and above their day job to put this budget together on an annual basis, as you can tell just from the 3-ring binder that sits before us. So a thank you to all of you for keeping us in school, looking out for the safety and health of our students, and also working to continue to put together a budget that continues to invest in and deliver, I think, one of the best educations in the state and one of the best in the country. So thank you for all the hard work behind the scenes on that. Before we get started, I'll turn it over briefly to Dr. Adley. I'll also just acknowledge she was going to join us, but she has double duty today. But thank you, Monica McNally was going to join us. She is online, but she is also with a whole team of people going up to the high school to send out test kits. So a lot of people doing a lot of good volunteer work, as always, in this town. Thank you. With that, Dr. Adley, you wanted a moment?
Yeah, just good morning, everyone. It's nice to be back in person. And I had a wee opportunity the other night remotely to express my appreciation to people, to the staff for all of their preparation. But since I'm in person this morning, I'd really like to take the opportunity to explicitly thank the members of my cabinet, in particular from the business office, Mr. Ruddle, but also Marge, Shirley, and Christopher for all of their efforts. And indeed, just behind the scenes for Michelle and Nadine for their work too. Done a tremendous job, and this doesn't come together easily, as you know. It takes a team to do that. So since I'm in person, I would like to recognize them in person this morning before we kick off. But we're excited, and we're excited to get started this morning.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Adley. So let's dig right in. So we are going to the discussion of the superintendent's proposed 2022-23 personal operating and equipment budgets. We will start out with RC01, Darien High School.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for those very kind words, Mr. Janine. The first thing I'd like to do, of course, is thank Board of Education and our parents and our community for support of the high school budget. It invests much of the funds in our educators, the most important resource, of course, that we have to provide an excellent education for our students. And the operating budget allocations provide our educators with what they need to deliver an excellent program to our students in our classrooms, and we thank you. To jump right in, enrollment at the high school is projected to increase by 23 students this year. An examination of our class size, which was reported earlier in the year to the Board of Education, allows us to conclude that this increase can be accommodated without a significant increase in class size across our departments, with 2 exceptions in our PE and health departments, as well as in special education. The increase request in special education will be addressed later today in the budget presentations. In RCO1, the increase is seen on it's a 0.6 FTE request in health and PE. This increase will reduce class sizes in health and PE from 24 average to 22. And the average will lead to a maximum, hopefully, within health and PE of 26 students. It might seem at first glance that a class size of 26 or 28 in PE is acceptable, and I think that is something that we would agree upon in terms of volleyball or badminton or soccer. In the health portion of the curriculum, however, teachers are delivering very important instruction, supporting our students in many areas of health and well-being in classes inside the building in classroom instruction, and class sizes of 26, 28 in those settings make that more challenging. Excuse me. So we would request an increase of 0.6 FTE. This would be, you'll see later, in combination with a 0.4 position presented by the elementary schools, so that we would be able to hire a highly qualified person in this role. Moving on to other personnel requests, you see in account 21 to 20, curriculum supervision, we've increased that request by $8,979 to accommodate two stipends. One is a reinstatement of the China Exchange Program stipend, and we hope to be able to bring back this very important program to DHS and to our students. And so we are placing that request back into this budget so that we have the necessary funds should we be able to welcome that program back to DHS. Second stipend is for a new position, SSD coordinator, which is actually named by our college board friends in terms of supporting students with disabilities for standardized testing. In all of the standardized testing areas, the ACT, college board, and GSS, all the tests that are given at the high school. Once our counselors, case managers, and families determine together the accommodations that students will need to meet the demands of these standardized tests, there are many logistical organizational responsibilities for managing the delivery of those important accommodations. And so what we're asking for in this position is someone who will help support that work in the organizational and logistical side, not in the decision-making side. So this is would be things such as some of our students require testing over multiple days, setting up the organizational scheduling piece of those tests during the school day with proctors, et cetera. There are many logistical organizational pieces to this that could be managed by a highly organized person who would really be in support of the work that our director of guidance does. And we would allow her to be doing work that that she needs to be doing and overseeing this work rather than in the clerical and organizational side. In account 11013, the Bursar Administrative Assistant account, we've requested an increase in this position from 0.5 FTE currently to 0.8 FTE. This is a result of increasing demands on this position in managing accounts at the high school. There are new demands being put in place, which Mr. Rudel could probably explain better than I could in terms of the accounting side. But these demands will increase the time to do this work, a very important work, well. And so we are asking for an increase in that position. And we've shared some comparable district data there to let you see that 0.8 FTE is common among our comparable districts. Moving on to the operational budget, there are significant changes in 3 accounts. Account 22003 is textbook consumables, and you see an increase there of $15,884, significant increase. This is due to an increase, a welcome increase in AP Spanish enrollment. Next year, we will have 255 students who potentially will qualify for the course. And this includes current sophomores and juniors. These consumable textbooks are the books used for the course, and very, very important to the preparation for the AP exam at the end of the course. This is in particular, particularly a bubble year, and that's why we're seeing this significant increase. As you may remember, the current sophomores who would potentially be qualifying for the course entered DHS, many of them at the Spanish 3 level, as a result of Spanish education being introduced at the elementary level. So we end up with students who are arriving at DHS in Spanish 3 last year. At the same time, we had students, juniors, who are currently in Spanish 4 as well. And so there is this kind of bubble year where these two have met at one point. So we have a very large enrollment in Spanish 4. And we're excited to be able to offer AP Spanish to those students next year. So we want to be prepared to have the right materials for that increased enrollment. Account 102003, other student activities. There is an increase there of $7,000, which again reinstates the funding for the China exchange program that has been part of that line. These funds are in place to support the welcome events, receiving our students from China that have become a part of the tradition of that program. Welcome dinners, events that happen during the time that they're here, and supporting those events for our students to be together with our students from China outside of school hours, especially, are really important to the exchange program and the development of those relationships in the very short time that we have them with us. And then finally, account 73001, equipment and furniture. There's a request from our science department to support the purchase of Pasco motion detectors and force carts, part of the mechanics piece of physics. Again, this is resulting in a very consistently high enrollment, a robust enrollment in our physics program. We have 3 full-time physics teachers and a part-time physics teacher at DHS. And so it is very often the case that 3 sections of physics are working in 3 labs at the same time. And so having these additional equipment can allow for 3 courses to be studying the same concept and doing the same experimentation simultaneously without any disruption to any of the sections of the course. And so that is it for major changes with the high school budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Rich, could I ask you just give a little high level on what's changing from an accounting perspective in the Bursar's office? I know a lot of stuff has moved online in terms of payments and different things like that. So you think efficiencies, but just a little update on that.
Sure.
Thank you.
So the year that we're currently in, there's a new GASB pronouncement, GASB 84, which does require all student activities to be classified as a special revenue fund. So that means it all has to go through Munis. So currently we use School Cash Online. We still have to currently use School Cash Online because that's our mechanism to collect funds electronically. So now we're essentially running 2 systems simultaneously. So School Cash Online will be the mechanism to collect revenue, and then Munis will be essentially the mechanism to record and then issue out checks. If you look at the Bursar over the last 5 years, that position has worked about 150 hours above what a 0.5 is. And then that person's been paid on payroll memos and there's been budget adjustments for the last 5 years. That really makes it about a 0.6 position, a little over 0.6. We're estimating that the GASB 84 pronouncement will add probably about another 150 hours to that position. So that'll end up actually being close to like a 0.75. That's really how we got to that 0.8. It does kind of put us in line with our peers within the DERG. But the position currently now, just based on what we're required to do, is going to have to run 2 systems simultaneously.
Okay. Thank you, Rich. I appreciate that. I will open it up for additional board questions or comments. Mrs. McCammon.
On that note, one of the things we've been working on is standardizing some of the collection of student activity dollars for different types of extracurriculars. Are we able to do this even better as we move into this new system?
So one of the things that, from a control perspective, will be nice is, so Munis has what's called workflow. So workflow is an individual puts in a requisition and then it has an approval process to turn into a purchase order and then the check can be cut. School Cash Online doesn't actually have that feature. So by actually having it in Munis, you're gonna have a little bit more control over what gets cut out of the student activity account. And so while it's not just the high school that has to go in Munis, all the schools have to go in Munis, it's just obviously the high school is the biggest student activity account that we have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sini.
And then what's the timing on the China exchange program? What semester does that typically occur?
Alan, can you just confirm spring?
Sure, yes. Well, the visit is typically, we receive students in usually the end of September, early October, and then our students travel typically in March or right before the April break typically. We've been in communication with Shanghai #3 Girls School to begin communication about whether or not we can open the program again, including conversations about continuing our connection online if that's not possible. But these funds, we hope, are reserved with the very positive thoughts that we may be able to move forward with this important exchange.
The follow-up to that is, do we know what the travel status is now between the two countries?
I haven't, understandable. I mean, there's the health condition and also the political interactions, obviously, that are complicated. The year before we entered into COVID, you might remember that our visiting students were not able to gain visas to travel to the United States. So that remains an open question, Mr. Sini.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Ackman.
So this Bursar position, and I think this is a question more for Mr. Rudel, does it need to be handled at the high school level, or could it be folded into the finance office since finance is already working with Munis so much?
So it's going to be a combination of both. The finance office is going to take the bank reconciliation over, and then the actual issuance of the checks will come from the business office through accounts payable. But the collection of receipts, the posting of catalog items and School Cash Online, things like that really do have to be done at the high school.
Okay.
I don't see any other hands. Mr. Brown, Mrs. Worm, you're good? Any other board questions or comments? I will move over to anyone from the Board of Finance. You see any hands, Michelle?
I do not.
Okay. RTM F&B, Ed?
Yeah, no, education.
Yeah, sorry, RTM Education I'll go to.
Yeah.
Anything, Ed?
Yeah, a couple of questions, please. So with the SSD coordinator, someone's asked what is that ad that's not covered by the director of guidance, school counselor, and case manager?
That's being done by the director of guidance currently. And we would request that some of this work would, make sure that Megan's not doing work that is logistical in nature and organizational in nature, and doing work that oversees the process, as we believe the administrator in that role should be doing.
Okay, and so then the stipend is effectively works the same as like a coaching stipend. So it's getting another professional to do that work as kind of extra.
Exactly.
Okay, and then a couple more questions here. On the China program, since we didn't have it during COVID, where is the $10,000 that was used for that?
It was not included in the budget for this year.
Okay. Another question, why is there, so if someone's asking about I'm assuming this is kind of going back to the PE question, and I've got one of my own on that one. But let me ask this other person's question first. So why is there not a full teacher allocated to teaching gifted? And I'm not sure where I'm assuming that's coming from the detail schedule, so I can't give you the site on it. Do you know that?
Ed, do you know what the question's not clear, Ed? What is the question?
I think, well, because we're talking about raising the FTE number for PE. And I think perhaps someone is noticing that there's not a full-time equivalent teacher associated with the gifted program. Is that possibly it?
So,
I will answer, I guess, the best answer I have. Sorry.
Why don't you come back to us with it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll we're not going to get into a lot of back and forth.
Fine.
Questions.
Sure. Yeah.
So we'll ask the questions. If there's something we can answer very simply, we will, and then we'll just take the questions. Thanks, Ed.
Right. Yeah, I got a couple. Dude, sorry, just a couple more on the PE question in general, sort of going, sort of focus on class size to 24, 22. I guess but this is my question. Just, is there a general, I don't want to call it, I guess, sort of standard, but do we look at PE differently than other classes when we're sort of focused on what is the right class size? And then two other questions, apologies. On the Bursar cost, the increase in 0.5 to 0.8, based on the cost here, it's a sort of $53,000 salary. So what was sort of the other cost that is in the Bursar's budget, and for lack of a better term, because it seems like it's more than salary. And then the last question that I have is, what comprises the 70% increase for quote unquote student activities? What are the items to account for a 70% increase year on year?
Thank you, Ed.
Yep.
I think, Rich, the quick answer is there's no other costs associated other than salary or stipend. That's because that's just that type of line item, right?
For the Bursar, there's 2 people in that line item.
Got it. Okay. That's
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Jack, I see you. I just want to circle back with you real quick.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Jack Davis, 197 Hoyt Street. You mentioned that there are 255 students available for the AP Spanish. Can you provide, not now, what was the number available for the current year and for the prior year?
Thanks, Jack. CDSP?
Good morning. We just have one question about the China exchange. Is there any budget increase included for DHS students traveling to China, or is this completely funded by parents and or the receiving China school?
Okay, thank you. CPAC, I'm looking for Jamie. Any high school questions?
Trisha is.
Great. Hi, Trisha.
Hi, Trisha Bresnahan.
That's all right. We don't need name addresses and all that good stuff.
Oh, okay, speaking on behalf of CPAC, thanks.
Thank you.
So we were thinking it's really nice to see that all the new classes that were presented the other night that are going to be at DHS, and the fact that Mandarin will begin at MMS. And we've been asking for years for sign language at DHS because many students with language-based disabilities, which is a significant amount of the kids at the school who have difficulty with languages, would be able to fill their language requirement. And in addition, in an increasingly inclusive world, sign language would help students communicate post-graduation. Also, regarding PD, is there a budgeted PD for DHS teachers on the scheduled PLC Friday mornings? Or is that collaboration time? And also regarding PD, since the beginning of the team top model at DHS, is there PD for new teams that are going to be taking on these classes? Regarding the SSD, the cost for the SSD coordinator isn't specifically listed. Is it grouped with other items? And will the SSD coordinators see kids' IEPs? Usually accommodations are in line with existing IEPs. And also the SSD, it's great to have this person who's up to date on standardized test changes. Will they work directly with parents or through case managers? Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. The SSD coordinator is a stipend position, as Rich outlined.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
we can answer that one quickly. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to any public comment. I'm sorry, who? Clara Sartori. Hey, Clara.
Well, Michelle can see.
Ms. Sartori has her hand up, but she's not chair, so we were going to wait for questions
well,
during
that's-
public comment.
Yeah, yeah, we can go to public comment.
You want to go to
You
public
hear me
comment
now?
or wait for
Yeah,
Ms.
no, we're
Sartori?
done. We're done with the partners, so we can go to public comment.
Ms. Sartori, you were recognized and unmuted.
I just wanted to ask you one thing about the China program, whether you could expand on the issues with the visa that were present, I think, before the pandemic. So at some point, not necessarily today, could you expand on that a little bit? Thank you.
Well, I didn't understand the question.
Clara, what do you mean expand on it? The students couldn't get visas last year. They wouldn't have been able to go based on COVID. So I'm not sure there's anything else that's needed from an explanation standpoint.
I think she's asking, do 2 years ago,
I thought there was a visa.
the students
Yeah.
from China were not allowed to enter
Right.
the US because of restrictions from
Right.
the United States not allowing foreign visitors.
Right. So China was not allowing foreign visitors.
No.
US.
Correct, but I think that before,
Yes, 2 years ago.
Right. Thank you.
okay, never mind. I guess, I think, David,
Of the China students. Then we had COVID.
Right.
So now we are in the third year and we think that visas will open up again.
Correct.
But we have not gotten travel confirmation.
Yeah.
But we will.
Is
need
that good, Clara?
that's what that's good. That's what I wanted to know.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I think with the China exchange thing, it's just one of those, we're not going to go back in time and look at what happened or didn't happen. We'll continue to monitor. It's a great program. I had a daughter participate in it. If we can pull it off, great. There's a lot to come on that. Moving along. Ellen, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm
You-
back for Fitch Academy, I think.
Oh, great. You're up for that. Fitch Academy. Public, sure.
Hi, Katie Lublin, 24 Maplewood Drive. I just quickly wanted to echo the support that Ms. Bresnahan from CPAC offered about the positive benefits of ASL being offered. This would work so well with a lot of programs. Our students who have language-based learning difficulties oftentimes wind up being exempt from foreign language. And I think that this would bring a second language to a lot more students who otherwise would not be able to have that as part of their education. So just wanted to thank them for bringing that point and echo support for that.
Thank you, Katie. Michelle, any other hands up for public comment?
Not at this time.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Ellen, I guess we will move on to Fitch Academy, RCO2.
Thank you very much. And I thank you again for supporting Fitch Academy, an outstanding and very important program in our community, an extension of Darien High School. And thank you also to Dennis Cabrera and the entire team of educators at Fitch Academy who support our delightful students there. There are 22 students currently at Fitch, and it offers a program for our students who need a smaller classroom environment in order to meet the expectations and learning that we hope for them and support them intellectually, socially, and emotionally in this smaller environment. There are no significant changes to the budget for Fitch. The only increase is really the increase that's part of the contract for the lease that we use for our location of Fitch currently. So I thank you and
Bless you.
happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ellen. Any board questions? Mrs. Best?
As I see, we're going into the last year of the current lease. I guess I just want to, I look forward to hearing how we're considering the future of Fitch as we consider new or continuing the space, the location, considering if the program might be larger, broader, explore revenue possibilities. I'm not sure, but just a conversation I look forward to having in the coming months.
Thank you, Mrs. Best.
I can actually address that, Mrs. Best. We've actually had discussions this year about Fitch, but given the actual change and the contract renewing, which is, and I want to thank Mr. Nielsen for the actual support of this program and the children in particular. You can feel it, right? Which really makes a difference. But I think you will see, I can flag it right now for you, there are going to be some recommendations next year that will align to the reestablishment of the contract going forward with a wee bit expanded space and other opportunities. So we thought that would be the time to do it all at one time and look at it at one time. So that's the first flag for next year.
Thank you.
Just to follow up to that, is there any benefit in negotiating this year to extend the lease, or you don't see that, Alan, in the like an early negotiation to lock in the space that you're seeking or something?
I think we just like continue the discussion,
Okay.
which has really started really early at this point. And I'm excited about the possibility for the kids over there, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Senior. Any other board? Yes, Mrs. Parent.
Hi, Mrs. Dunn. Thank you for all the information. I'm just curious if you have any ideas about enrollment going forward. And I know that it changes and people go in and out, but do you anticipate being close to that 24 number?
I do. You know, the 24 number has worked very well, and we have never had a situation where we have had to say to a student that we don't have space at Fitch. And so we, you know, don't expect that to happen, and we'll continue obviously to monitor that closely, as Dr. Adley said, in terms of planning for the future. But there is a tremendous family created there, and we feel like we have the right setting right now.
Thanks.
Any other board members? Tara, Dave, you're good? I will say I got to participate in the graduation this year with Ellen and the team, and it was phenomenal. What an incredible group of young people, and some of them actually participated in the main graduation, which was very exciting to give them that opportunity. I will move quickly over to any questions from the Board of Finance.
Not right now, thank you.
Thank you. I will move to RTM F&B. Jack Davis.
No questions.
Thank you, Jack. RTM Education. Ed.
No questions.
Thank you, Ed. CDSP.
Any plans to expand the program to bring in outside students to produce revenue? I have 3 questions. My second question, at what size is the program not effective for students? And my last question is, any plans to expand Fitch to the middle school age group?
Thank you, Lori. We'll move over to CPAC.
Hi. For CPAC, we also were curious about the future plan. That was already asked. And the what is the dollar amount under Fitch that or Fitch costs that are under RC 24?
Thank you. I will move over to any public comment on Fitch Academy.
There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Ellen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Have a good day all.
We will move on now to Middlesex Middle School, RC03.
Good morning. Thank you for
Good
taking the time to meet with us. Just to jump right in, as you can see with our projected enrollment, we are down 23 students from this year, which will keep our class sizes roughly the same. We only have a couple things to highlight this year, one of them being a potential STEM course in 6th grade. We are currently examining the structure of our schedule to offer more electives to the students to be in line with the high school. And one of those would be the introduction of a 6th grade STEM course. The only cost to that would be the professional development of a current staff member who could run that course. If you see the account 101003 for the Academic Center, that is one of our most attended after-school clubs. Students from all grades attend to individually work on homework or to receive help from content area teachers. We asked for a modest increase to keep the club running as it does now, 4 days a week with multiple content area teachers every day that attend. Moving on to 21602. Last year during the COVID, we had an increase from the ARP ESSER grant to move from 1 to 2 campus monitors, and we are asking that we retain both of those. The reason being we have such a big school with a large number of students, having 2 campus monitors adds an extra layer of security. They are also able to assist with monitoring the hallways, monitoring the cafeteria, monitoring recess, and just generally keeping the building running smoothly. With 2 monitors, as you can see, we're also in line with the rest of the district of the campus monitor ratio to students. One of the more exciting options that we're hoping to offer next year is the introduction of Mandarin Chinese. It is a 3-year rollout starting with 6th grade next year. The cost would be a 0.6 FTE and the materials and resources to start the program in 6th grade. This follows the program that is currently in line where students choose their language when they enter Middlesex and they stick with the language for 3 years. It also vertically aligns with them keeping Mandarin if they travel into the high school. And one of our last ones is looking at the general teaching supplies. There is a large increase of 16,000, which is split between 2 different items. About 6,000 of that is because additional line items were added and money was reallocated for specific departments. However, the exciting part is there's about 9,000 budgeted for a Genius Hour, which is a inquiry-based student-led learning opportunity that gives students the opportunity to explore their own unique interests in the world around them. They will be working on skills such as creating research questions, research skills, and then presentational skills. And this budget allows for the materials for students to do this, as well as present their findings in an interest fair type of setting to their peers. So these are the big items that we'd like to highlight coming up for next year at Middlesex.
Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate it. We will move over to the Board of Ed for any questions or comments. Mrs. McCammon.
Carolyn, good morning. Could you give us some more information about what Unified Arts, what that means to you from a bigger picture perspective and what your plan is there, not just this year, but what are your thoughts, please?
Sure. We're currently looking at the schedule to allow for 2 different things. One is a dedicated PLC or professional learning community time to really focus on teaching and instruction. The second is to offer students more elective opportunities. So we'd like to have some teachers that have interests or skills outside of their content area offer an elective. We'd also like to look at bringing in electives that match the high school, such as STEM, in order to allow them to have that vertical alignment and really pursue their interests before they get to the high school so they can really in-depth study once they get to the high school. So it will be kind of a multi-year plan of looking at what we can incorporate and how we can do that with our existing schedule structure.
Okay, thank you. So for this year, it's just the 6th grade STEM, and then you'd be looking at more in the future, or
Yes.
are there? Okay.
Yep. And we would like to branch it out to 7th and 8th grade as well in the future. It's just, we're going to start with the 6th grade STEM because we have 7th and 8th. So it'll make that alignment easier for next year.
Thank you.
Mrs. Achman.
Good morning, Carolyn. How are you?
Good morning.
I'm curious about this Genius Hour. Is it for all students, for interested students, for qualifying students? Can you talk a little bit more about who's doing this?
Sure, it's for all students. It would be once a month during flex, so we would have an hour-long flex once a month. And the teachers would really work on the skill building with the students of, finding that area of interest. How do you create a research question? How do you research? What sources do you find? But it's an opportunity that allows the students to pursue their own interests in a semi-structured setting. There are other middle schools, such as Saks Middle School, that have a version of this already. So it would be something that aligns with what some of the neighboring middle schools are doing.
Okay, and does this replace the current practice? I think they have a science project they all choose and then have or is this in addition to?
In addition to, so this would be something for every student that they would get to do once a month.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Any other board questions or comments? Mrs. McCammon?
I was just going to ask you to expand on that. I mean, it sounds interesting, but I understand other schools have it. Why do you think this is important?
I think it's important to give students kind of a voice and choice in their education. And this gives them once a month to really pursue a unique and individual interest to them that they get to share with the rest of their peers. And it's honing on specific skills that they need to be successful, not only in school, but in life. And it really engages them in something they're passionate about to share their passion with others.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McCammon. Mrs. Best.
Thank you very much. Two quick questions. First, I just wanted to confirm that the second campus monitor was previously funded through a grant and now is in this budget. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then thank you, on the Genius Hour, it sounds interesting. I'm just curious, does it build to something? Are they working toward a project? It's kind of reminding me a little of Capstone, which was something we had going on for a while here. And I'm wondering if it is similar or if I'm going in the wrong direction.
It's a little similar, but it's a little less structured in that the students get to choose with the teacher guidance. And yes, it does end in a project fair where they present to their peers and show what they're passionate about and everything that they've learned.
Excuse me, Miss Worm has her hand raised on Zoom as well.
Okay, great. I will look. Yeah, go ahead, Mrs. Worm.
Hi, yes, I just wanted some of my questions have already been answered on this Genius Hour as well. I'm kind of curious, have we looked at interest level? I mean, where did this idea come from? Are the students saying that they're looking for this? It kind of reminds me a bit of the 9th grade idea project. And also, you're talking about doing an hour flex once a month. Where is that hour coming from?
So we do have, so we have extended flexes occasionally when we have something that's happening in school, such as an extended advisory like we did earlier this year. This came from just talking with surrounding middle schools and looking at something that could really engage the students in their own learning to teach them those self-directed skills. And this was something that we decided upon and worked with some of our teachers, and we're still ironing out a lot of the details, but it seemed like this was the route to go with based on conversations with surrounding middle schools that really engages the students and helps them take what they've learned in their classes and self-direct it into something that they're really passionate about.
I'm just wondering if, because I know Flex is being used for, catching up on extra homework time. There's a lot going on with the students in the past couple of years, and also social emotional learning. Is Flex going to be enough to handle all these things? Are we overloading?
I go right the month because we do have 5 days of flex in our current schedule. Taking one a month will not affect their social emotional or their academic time twice a week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Worm. Mrs. Ackman.
Can we go over to the academic center? Can you tell me, is the increase a salary increase? Is the club running more often? What's driving the increase?
The increase is driven due to the amount of students that we have that are attending, and the current budget only allows for a certain amount of teachers to come per day. If we increase it, we can allow more content area teachers and more students to attend.
Okay. And then I guess I would just ask if we're seeing more, I mean, this has been like a stalwart of the middle school, this club, so I think it does great things. But if we're seeing more and more students attend for homework or needing help, that might be indicating something to us, or hopefully to classroom teachers, that there might be something to look at there. So just holistically, it might be something for the middle school to look at.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. I don't see Dave Brown. Mr. Brown, you good?
All good, Duke. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All right. Any other board questions or comments? We will move on.
May
Yes,
may I just
Dr.
ask,
Edley.
may I just ask, Carolyn, just for 2 seconds, just to talk about, it's not in the budget, I apologize, but just the idea of this outside classroom, that we may look for community support for, just for 2 seconds, if you wouldn't mind, your vision for that?
If you can do it in 2 seconds, I'd be impressed.
Yeah, I could try.
I
The
would
outdoor,
rather you do it in a wee bit of time.
the outdoor classroom idea was both bred from COVID and for giving students an extra place to learn. There are studies that show when students are in nature outside, it re-engages them and it triggers a little bit of their learning process. This would be put into the courtyard that currently exists right outside the library. It would have benches that almost make stadium seating, an outdoor TV, an outdoor whiteboard that would be encased year round, and a giant shade that goes across the buildings. And it would actually be an outdoor classroom where they have Wi-Fi, teachers can bring the kids outside to learn. And it just gives them a new environment, kind of refreshing in the middle of the day if they can go outside and just kind of have classes out there, work together, collaborate in a different environment than sitting in the classroom all day.
Thank you,
Great.
Carolyn.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
All right, we'll move over to questions, comments, Board of Finance. On
All
middle
set.
school.
Got it, thanks.
Hey, Taylor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Any questions?
I think she said she's all.
I'm all
All
set.
set?
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Taylor. Move over to RTMF&B, Jack Davis.
I have 2 questions. One is, I'm looking at the campus monitor. At some time, and pardon my naivete, I'd like to understand the difference between the campus monitor and the resource officers, because when we add the resource officer into the Middlesex and high school, both current and proposed ratios are very different. That's the first question. The other one came from one of the members, and so I'm just going to read it, and we're not sure exactly how to ask this, but is the additional school monitor in response to events such as the offensive graffiti? That's the elephant in the room. What is the Board of Ed doing? And we know you've been talking about this to better manage a safe environment. And so I'm sure that will be discussed during this budget process. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Move over to RTM Education. Ed?
Yeah, got a few questions and apologies if some of these may have been asked and answered. But with respect to Mandarin, do we have an expected enrollment count? How did you sort of assess, this is a few questions lumped together. How did you sort of assess student interest in this program? Is it going to be one class? Is it multiple classes? And if Mandarin doesn't work, I'm assuming that the school will be able to reassign kids to another language.
Is that it, Ed?
That's it on Mandarin. There are a couple other questions. I'll give you those as well. On the Genius Hour, what are the sort of specific supplies that are used in this program? And then, you talked about, all students have access to the program, but is there some sort of general guidance as to, or some general data on how many kids are actually using it per session? I think just sort of something for folks to understand the scale would be helpful. And then another question on gifted, similar to the last. So the question is, again, for a school of more than 1,000 students, why is there only 0.99 FTE for the gifted program? One thought I had maybe when the district answers would be to provide a little bit of data as to how this program is sized. Is it demand driven, i.e. we have this many students that want to get in it and that's why we have this many teachers? Or is it, supply driven? We have this many slots. And so I think we've had a couple of questions on this. And so members of the committee might benefit from just having an answer that gives a sense as to how the district kind of runs that program. And then I have one question myself, and this may not be the right place for it, but because we had the swastika issue in the middle school and we've had all this discussion about hiring a consultant, and I certainly hope this is not something we need to do again, but my suggestion would be that we should be budgeting for this kind of a cost and be proactive as opposed to reactive, and hopefully not need the money.
Thank you, Ed. We'll move on to CDSP.
Getting in my steps today.
You are.
I have 3 questions, actually 4. Will Project Lead the Way begin to incorporate robotics into the existing STEM curriculum so that robotics teaching can be expanded and made increasingly available to grades 6 through 8? The outdoor classroom sounds like a wonderful opportunity. Would it be possible to include anything in the Middlesex RC or the Middlesex capital budget? How will electives like STEM be equitably offered to all students? And any consideration for ASL club at the middle school?
Thank you, Lori. We'll move over to CPAC.
Well, Mr. Chairman, can I just ask respectfully, unless the administration expects to put the outdoor classroom in the budget, that we move that conversation outside of budget? I think it's going to get commingled and confused.
Yep.
It's exciting, but in a regular meeting.
It's a preview.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Yeah.
Receiving budget questions now on it because we keep talking about
Yeah.
it during budget.
No, understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. We'll move over to CPAC.
Hi.
Hi, Tricia.
So for MMS, we see unified sports costs in the athletic budget, which we assume is DHS. So MMS had such a great turnout of kids last spring for unified, and will this continue because it's such a great opportunity and to create interest moving up to DHS too. And the PD cost for this year, 2,200, doesn't seem like a lot. I'm wondering if that's enough. And is the transition from kids from elementary to middle school is always a tricky one, and wondering if there's any PD for that. And also PD for teachers new to the co-taught model each year. Sometimes there's new pairs, if there's any PD. And I think that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Tricia. We will now open it up, Michelle, to public comment.
There are no raised hands in Zoom land. Would you like to go in person?
Yes. Anyone in person? Public comment? Okay. Double check on the hand raise.
No raised hands.
Great. Thank you all. Carolyn, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Carolyn.
We will move on to the elementary schools, and we will start with RC5, which is Hinley.
Good morning, Board of Education. If you don't mind, I'm Luke Forshaw, principal of Oxbridge. What I'm prepared to do today is provide an overview of elementary budgeting because we work as 5 schools and we have a very similar process for allocating funds or recommending funds for our operating costs. So if you're comfortable with it, what I'd like to do is provide an overview for all 5 elementaries. And then my colleagues are on the Zoom call as well, all the other principals of the respective schools, if you have specific questions to their RCs. Are you okay with that, Chairman?
I think it's worked well in the past, so thank you very much, Mr. Forshaw. I just expected you to be out on site building your new school.
Not today, not today. I'm here with you all this morning, so.
Great. No, thank you very much.
Okay, good to see you. And then for the members of the public and for the board who are following in your budget book, I'm starting on page 84, which provides a nice overview of our recommended operating budget and kind of an overview of the elementaries. So the elementary budgets really are formula driven and the formula based largely on enrollment. So it's very important that we watch those enrollment numbers as we do every fall and into the spring. They drive the operating costs in the line items, and I'll go into that in a moment, but just to provide that overview that we have a kind of modified zero-based budgeting. We look at every need of the building, just like every other RC does, but we've had a historical trend of using these formulas very successfully to provide for all of the schools. There are some personnel recommendations that we're moving forward this budget season. One is for an increase in teaching staff at Hindley Elementary based on increased enrollment of 1.0. We're also requesting a 0.2 increase in PE. And while in the budget it sits at Hindley Elementary, it really serves all 5 elementaries at 0.2 increase. We need that in order to maximize our schedule given the increases of sections that we've had across the 5 elementaries. We used itinerant teaching staff that travel between buildings in order to make our schedule work. So this year you were kind enough to use budget control to increase a PE position this year to start the year so our schedule could work, and we'd like to increase that from a 0.2 that you've allocated for us this year, add a 0.2 to make it going into next year a 0.4, and that would help us really just be able to operate at the program need with all the PE classes we have across the 5 elementary schools. There's a slight increase in teacher aides at 2 of the elementary schools, that's Ox Ridge and Holmes, a request for 0.5 respectively in each building, so 0.5 at Ox Ridge, 0.5 at Holmes. Again, enrollment driven, there's a formula described that talks about a ratio between students and aides, and so that as the numbers have tricked up in Ox Ridge at Holmes, we're requesting the para to support those number increases respectively. Our equipment line, I'm moving on to page 85. Our equipment line each year, the board supported us with an increase to make sure that we can provide for equipment that might get damaged or need replacement, furniture, I should say, each year. And so we're requesting to keep that furniture line in place for replacement. And also new to the elementaries this year that we're excited about is the open choice program. It's been discussed a few times in different ways, shapes, and forms at the board level, but we thought it wise to add to this narrative. The request is to basically add 4 kindergarten students at 4 of the elementary schools. And the logic of why 4 and not all 5 is because Royal Elementary School is very close to breaking a kindergarten section. And so the thinking was we're going to recommend to do 4 kindergarten students at the schools that can accommodate those students without breaking an additional section. This is, you'll see an ad for revenue. The Open Choice program has a $3,000 sort of credit to the districts for each of the students who are coming on. And we've actually recommended to increase our operating account slightly by each school who is welcoming open choice students by $2,240 to make sure that we can capture some any other material cost to welcome those students on. The only other personnel request that I'm just going to speak to now, but you'll see it in the maintenance RC later, and excited for the new school at Ox Ridge is a 1.0 increase in custodial staffing for the new Ox Ridge building to accommodate the increase in size as we move into the academic wing for next year. So that's just a really brisk overview. If you look into each of the respective RCs, my colleagues are all here, I'm here, and we're happy to entertain any questions from you all, the public, however we can be helpful.
Thank you, Luke. Appreciate that. I think we'll go around each RC and see if anyone has any questions specific to the schools, and then they might have a broader question or discussion. The one I'll throw out, I think Mr. Lynch is on the line here. You've got 2,000 allocated for equipment and furniture for each school. Have we thought through the furniture and equipment that's going to be available from Ox Ridge? Since we're buying all new for Ox Ridge, we'll have a whole school full of furniture and equipment. So I'd like to understand kind of assessment as to, is there stuff there that we can use? So this line item is almost not needed this year. And then I know at an Ox Ridge committee level, we've talked about donating, selling, that'll play out from a committee level standpoint, but just something to think about in terms of that line item and what we will have from that school. With that, I'll open it up to board comments or questions specific to Hinley.
Oh.
Can I?
Yeah.
We've received a number of emails regarding open choice, and this is a meeting organization question, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Because it does flow over each one of these RCs. Do we want to carve that out in some way, shape, or form during this discussion?
My goal was to end on that kind of topic after we went through at a high level each individual school. Do you want to go each individual school, or do we just open it up to specific questions around elementary schools?
My question's individual to Hinley, but
Sure.
Dr. Forsythe, it may go broader because it's the PE teacher. So given that we have 10.7 FTEs, I'm looking at them closely. And I know in the past, we've been able to manage our PE teachers around the district. Schools share PE teachers. So have we done everything we can to look at, I know you know where this is going. Scheduling, do we have some schools in the afternoon and some schools in the morning before we add more people? Is there anything we can do between the 5 schools to share what we have?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. We spend large amounts of time over the summer planning our schedules in general, and PE in particular has been a really interesting Rubik's Cube for us. We have tried our very best to use the people that we have across the 5 elementaries. What it really boils down to is the challenge of, yes, if you look at the hours per day, it kind of, you go, okay, well, the FTE and the hours per day and the instructional classes, but then there's the actual reality of the person, the PE teacher who needs to then be able to have a lunch period that's not at 9 a.m, have a prep period that's provided by contract and being able to accommodate that. And then certainly the travel time between the schools. We've come up with models where you have a PE teacher who could travel between 5 elementary schools in one day. That would be, they'd have to get to each school within 2 minutes. So on paper, you see different models where in theory, you go, if the person could travel between the 5 elementary schools with a 2-minute buffer in between and have lunch at 9 a.m, yes. But in practice, this is why we're making the request. In practice, it just doesn't play out that way.
Okay, but you have looked, I mean, that's what I'm really checking as I push on FTEs. You've looked at it in every sort of way you can to schedule.
Well, so, and again, I give credit to my colleagues in the all of our assistant elementary principals have looked at this up and down, left and right. We have our friends at central office have kicked in. I think it was like right before the school year started, there was like, a 2-day powwow to just talk about this final PE. So there has been an extensive conversation about this position.
Yeah, it's been really looked at both at the principal level, at the central service level. Trying to avoid increasing the FTE where we can, but we just can't in this case.
What about the town helicopter?
Yeah. Light rail. Well, I'll keep it open for questions around the elementary schools. If you have a question specific to an elementary school, as we have those principals on board, just be specific to that elementary school. So any other board questions or comments around the elementary schools?
Generally, yes, but not Henley.
So generally, that's fine.
Okay.
Yep. Go ahead, Mrs. McCammon.
So on the, I'm going to start talking about open choice. And I have 2 questions at the moment. One was to make sure that I understood the cost per student correctly.
Yep.
So we intake about 3,000, but it looks like what we're projecting to be an elementary cost per student is closer to 5,000 and change. So our intake, right? Do I read that correctly? Because we're budgeting an additional 2,000 and something.
The 2,000 is in total, not per student.
That's in total. Okay, not per student. Thank you. I didn't understand that. Okay. And then the second thing was to make sure that I see it here, our paraprofessionals, that ratio does include open choice students in the numbers. It looks like it does. But I just wanted to confirm
I
that.
think that does, yes. In this case, yes. The enrollment numbers we got the other night from my presentation didn't include the open choice students. And I have an updated enrollment for people just for ease of looking at, but these actually do it here.
Thank you.
So let's pause a moment. We'll put open choice off to the side for a second. And let's get through any other questions around the elementary schools. And then we'll zero in on open choice. So we're not back and forth and we can capture all those important questions. Anything else with respect to the elementary schools? All right, sure. Go ahead,
So
Mrs. Ackman.
It's actually just general before we
Sure,
go to a bigger
yes.
topic. Mr. Riddle, can we look at our personnel run numbers? Like I'm looking at the object detail, the RCs, and then our front tab on personnel, and I'm getting different numbers. And it could be me, in all honesty, as I add this all up, but I'm getting 1 off, 2 off. So could we just make sure those tie out?
We can take another look. Each number within the budget is built on the specific person.
Okay.
So each line item, if it's 4 classroom teachers, has the 4 actual classroom teachers in the line item, or if it's a PE teacher, the PE teacher, et cetera.
Okay, so I might come back to it later, but that's what's running around in my head.
Okay, sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Good. Okay, any other questions? Mrs. Word, Mr. Brown? All right, then from an elementary school standpoint, I will open it up to board questions around open choice. Mr. Sini.
So this is a statement and then I guess a question, how it impacts longer term budgets. But, I think, first of all, I want to clarify, we've never made a vote as a board to implement open choice. It was since the meeting, Alan, go talk to our legislators. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've been talking about it for the past 2 years, yes.
Okay, so now we find ourselves in kind of a policy discussion within the budget, as I understand, because this is a brand new program that we're talking about implementing. So When I look back and when this budget book was actually created, we were looking at a pretty normal time. It takes 2 or 3 months to create the budget. The way this world has quickly changed in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks has been pretty dramatic. And, we're back to restricting our students at lunch and, taking a slice out of their lives, as I call it, each and every time. And I know there are mitigation factors and we have to do that. And when I supported the idea of open choice, I was looking at a much normal school year. So one of the concerns I have is, we're struggling to meet the needs of our own students right now in this environment. And, I was an optimist for many months through this, but as I look out, I don't see an end game with masking and some other mitigating factors that is truly impacting our students. Even midterms at the high school have been impacted and we've had to make changes. So, it's a general sense, I'm sorry to go on like this, but I'm going to look very closely at new programs that we're implementing in this type of environment. And, I guess my general point is I support the idea, but I want to start real slow. I want to, I'm not, maybe administration can talk about the 16 kids and how we chose that number. I want to really understand how we're thinking about how it waterfalls through in following years. I want to also understand how we're thinking about the new development projects coming in. I know we're developing those with mostly 1 and 2 bedrooms, and hopefully or I shouldn't say hopefully, but we envision the impact to be pretty minimal, but how we're thinking about that as we forecast forward. So I'll stop there, but I'm sure we're gonna have a lot of questions around this.
I think the only thing I'll add to that is just the understanding in the program. I think there's, confusion as to annually how the program works. You came up, I'd like to hear more about how you came up with the 4 per elementary school. But then what does next year look like? What does the next year look like? I mean, those folks started kindergarten. You've been very clear. They carry through to the senior year, which makes sense in terms of bringing someone into the district. But if we see that increase from the developments going on in town, what does next year look like? How does that look from a state perspective? We commit 1 year, we can't commit the next year. How does that work?
So if you don't mind, I'll just take a time just to frame some of those issues.
Perfect. Thank you.
I will say that this is one of the aspects in the budget that I'm most excited about. In many ways, I've said that for a couple of years now, and we've had that discussion at the table a couple of years. This is an opportunity to participate in a program that's been around for many years. It goes back to 40, 50 years when districts participated, when they weren't receiving funds from the state. We also have an opportunity to address and support issues of diversity that are front and center on our table. I'll say this, I think it's good for, as you might imagine, it's certainly good for the children that are coming in, but I think it's also good and enriches the experience for our entire community. Honestly, if there ain't, and I'll say that, I'm not casual about this statement, if we can't do it, I don't know who can do it in many ways. Sometimes you have to make some of the most challenging decisions in the most challenging circumstances. I'm not sure that what we're seeing environmentally and so on contextually is going to change that significantly to wait for a better time or newer time or a brighter time to do it. Just a couple of comments that just for clarification on a couple of things. No, you don't have to participate every year. I just advocate that we would personally. That would be my recommendation to the board. The 4 per school other than Royal would basically be based on class size. There's a discussion going around about, understandably, the money's involved. There's $3,000 that follow each child. And a few comments about that. Yes, we do get half the excess cost sharing grant per pupil. We'll get half of the students, so to speak, yes, at our rate. And the sending district, Norwalk, would receive half at their rate. That is true. That's generally the way it works. Special education would be reimbursed beyond anything beyond the $3,000. You may say, well, why not? Why do I have to why do they have to take that off the top? I've always said they shouldn't take it off the top, but they do take it off the top. But anything beyond the $3,000, there's discussion about, well, maybe there's regular education costs and extra education costs. I can say, working with many districts over many years, right? The number of times where there's been a dispute about special education reimbursement have been very minimal. I think the one I can only point to really is Hartford. And even that didn't go to litigation or anything like that. Not generally, you do get, I haven't experienced a situation where another district does not reimburse you. I'd be disingenuous to say, like, you always get it right at the right date. Does it always come in? No, but that's just the way organizations work. But I've always experienced, and in the local areas also, that we get those monies back. This is an exciting opportunity. I'm looking for I just feel passionate about this particular issue, and it's an opportunity. Sometimes you can say what you want, but people look at what you do. And this is one of the opportunities to impact our children's lives and enrich our children's lives, our students' lives, our teachers, our communities. I think it's the right thing to do. And the actual cost per pupil, we're over $20,000 obviously per pupil. Look, we're running the buildings, we're heating the buildings, we're doing all of these things regardless. So it's not really, like, honestly, I can make an argument that it's about $13,000 or $1,300 period to take the kids. We're not trying to tip classes. That's why honestly, I feel bad that I wish I could get Royal too, but I'm really trying to put it in place responsibly so that we don't tip classes necessarily, right? And require an extra teacher or otherwise. Once children come, they have to be a part of our community, right? And you want them to be a part of the community. It's like anybody else coming in from any, like, just transferring in type thing. And is it a regionalization? No, but it's certainly taking a leadership role. I can't tell you this. This district will take a tremendous leadership role in this. That's not the reason we're doing it. I think it's the reason we're doing it is because it's right for our kids. And I've always sat at this table and say, well, it might be great for the the best of the children in Connecticut in general. I just think it's a wonderful opportunity to make a statement, not to make the statement for the statement purpose, but to do the right thing. Honestly, I just believe that. And I won't call it incidental cost, but it's certainly not anywhere near the cost per pupil. That's just not the case, because you have a teacher, you have the buildings, transportation is provided by CES, so they provide that transportation. There is, I think in my budget actually, there's like a $10,000 line item that's for a sort of a liaison. My experience has been, and I've participated in this for 20 years, is it works, particularly starting it off, it works best when you have people who will liaison with the families, with our community members. Our community members would want to support all our children, right? And they won't be called Open Choice children, they'll be Darien children and Darien school children. And they're $10,000 our first week part-time position, liaison person, to work with our staff, to work with our community members, administration, so on and so forth. And I'll stop there, and maybe if there are more specific questions, I'm happy to.
Could I just ask a quick question? If the original 16, as they go through the schools, if one of them or two of them, how many of them opt out or move for whatever reason? There's no need to replace them, or look, it's just, it goes from 16 to 14 or 13 when it goes through when they go through the school. If they choose to leave or move for whatever reason.
Typically they drop out there. Now, I would say that it's not unlike the open, I call it the Open Choice program, but to get a request, Joe has got a sister or something, right? It'd be nice if they were both on, going to the same school type thing. And how the board would want to handle that through sort of policy, sort of either big P or small p policy, that's fine. Because in general, you could give the permission to the superintendent to increase or decrease as those come in and out. But starting at the start is really the best way, because it provides the kids with the most opportunity to be successful, and just iterating it that way. Because when they come in different places, honestly, I don't mind saying this, also they come in with more challenging situations, and it's a less of an opportunity to be successful. So doing it thoughtfully this way would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Adler. Mrs. McCammon.
Thank you for the perspective, Dr. Adley. I appreciate it. I think one of the conversations we've heard is this regionalization? I think there's a big difference between regionalization, which was moving the administrative functions to a more regional center, and finding regional efficiencies. We do that already. We know that McMahon is where you go to get an IB. We know that there are kids that go to Rogers. We know that we send kids to CES. There are times where you look at a region and say, what can we do more efficiently, but still keep our administrative centers where they are? And I think that's the difference between this and the regionalization that was on the table 2 years ago. That said, I do think that there are things that we have to look at this district. One is enrollment in particular. I think Duke, you made the point, Ellen and Rich, I would love to just see modeled, a student who starts now and goes through high school. What does that look like? Could we see that modeled for a number of years? I get that it's pretty hard to predict enrollment out too far, but that it starts to decline after 5 years. But I think it would be just nice for the board to take a look at what that would look like if we could, even if things were kept the same. The second piece is I'm curious to know, maybe Alan, if you're talking to area superintendents or Duke other board chairs, what are people saying about the impact of COVID? We have our builds and we're modeling that, but we know that kindergarten is notoriously hard to predict. And I'm curious to understand, our realtors, what are people thinking about the incoming kindergarten class this year, given that there still seems to be, the housing market has slowed down a bit, but we experienced a tremendous outmigration from New York City, and whether or not how we're feeling about our ability to predict that. And then my third point is I'm wondering if it's possible to create a ballpark incremental cost for a student. I mean, to your point, Alan, our cost per student includes a lot of fixed costs. And so, adding a new student doesn't require us to change a building. So we're not changing those fixed costs. Is it possible to create an incremental cost for an elementary student or a middle school student or a high school student so that we can do a better cost comparison? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McCammon. Mrs. Ackman.
So I would say, I think, and I'd go back and the website's down, I know, which is frustrating to all of us. I do think that Mr. Rossini is correct in that we didn't approve this program, but we did say, please move forward on it. There was interest in exploring more. I have lived in Connecticut my whole life, except for, a decade of it. And none of these arguments of these white papers that are going around, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, are original. They are the arguments that are always put forward when trying to not have open choice. And so to me, the answer, the question really becomes, there's nothing new. Now is a trying time, but I'm telling you, 10 years ago, Darien also didn't adopt open choice because it was a trying time. And when ABC came in, we got a letter this year saying that the community had a tough time, but now we're so happy we have it. So sometimes change is hard. And I do think that, look, you're not bringing in open choice because you're making money. Like that's not, so is there going to be a cost? Absolutely. And do we have to know that there is some cost associated? I think the question is, do we have a different goal? And what I heard from this board is we were willing to explore the benefits of that different goal. And so if we want to make it money-based, I will tell you open choice will never happen. Westport did this 25 years ago and their district is thriving and working, and it's not open choice kids and regular kids, it's Westport Public School students. So I think we have to refocus the conversation. It's never a good time unless you decide to put, your name on something and say, I want to try something different, is my opinion on this. I'm glad we've talked about the fixed cost because some of the costs I saw going around didn't make sense. You're factoring the transportation cost to kids who we're not paying for their transportation. So if we're gonna do analysis like that, I think we should be doing them here at this table because we have all the information and people may be well-meaning and trying to do the cost and not understand the full picture. But I just think we need to realize that we're not doing this for financial reasons. We're doing this for reasons of what we say is it is important for our children to have a more diverse experience. And it's important for other children to have a more diverse experience. And we're trying to help achieve that goal in the minimal way that we can. This program has existed for decades. It is not new. It is not risky. If you want, go around and ask the other districts about it. But I'm sorry. I feel like all the arguments I've seen are the arguments I have seen against it for years. It is never a good time unless you decide it's just time. That's how I feel.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Mrs. Parent.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. I will agree with what Mrs. Bachman is saying. And I asked if the board has received emails with the exact quote, something about risks and disadvantages to dairy. And I just make one out. That seems elitist in classes to me. And I would love at this table to talk about what are the benefits and what are the advantages to dairy. So Dr. Adley, can you talk to that a little bit? Oh, I'm sorry, my call was.
The benefits of it, particularly to our students and to our children, or to our students and to our staff and our community, is we're enriching the diversity of the community. And that's priceless. I mean, what is it we're the opportunity we're losing? These rich experiences for children to learn together and grow up in a diverse environment. Our kids are going out into the workforce into a diverse environment. They've actually told us through the last 2 years, that's a scenario that we're not preparing our students as well as we might. And they've wanted to have it. We've talked about student voice. If there's a voice about diversity and so on, that's been loud and clear. But the enrichment that takes place on a daily basis, not to mention you're changing the lives of other students, right? Just amazingly so when you hear the stories. But it's hard to quantify the total benefit of living, working, learning together in a diverse. That's the main benefit of it.
Mrs. Best.
Thank you. I would just add, it's probably equally difficult to calculate the cost of not starting the program at this point. I mean, I think we're already seeing some fallout of not having something like this in our community. So that's very difficult to calculate and needs to be considered in addition to the benefits that it does bring. I'd also say, I think we have to be careful about putting things on hold until we get back to normal times. I think I've said this before in other capacities, but I don't think we're going back to normal. We're going to get to a new normal at some point, but nobody can give us that date. And we've spent 23 months with things changing on us like crazy. And I just think we have to not use that argument anymore. We have to navigate where we are today. I think this is critically important. Our community needs this. I have a quick logistical question on it, which is to Mrs. McCammon's point, the kindergarten enrollment is volatile, or it's tough to predict at times. And as the self-appointed class size police, if we are finding come June, July, that our kindergarten enrollment is skewing in a way that we didn't anticipate, would we ever put 3 students in one school and 5 in another? Is there any flexibility there to make it work more comfortably to seed the first year?
Oh, I think there's benefits of children being dispersed, but they're not mutually exclusive as to, like, if we had to do it the way we do now to balance things. If we had to do something, we would certainly do whatever we would have to do to balance the classes. Yeah.
Thank you, Mrs. Best. Mr. Maroney.
Yeah, following up on that, because I have the similar question. So the thought now is to have 4 students in the elementary school. So would that be 1 student per, and there's 4 sections in the 4. So is that thought to be 1 student in each section, or is it thought to be broken up differently?
At the minute, it's 1 per section. If it plays out where, for whatever reason, there'd be 2 children in one class, then we would do that. But at the moment, that's the way it's slated.
And a follow-up question going back to transfer. So I guess to Mrs. Best's question as well. So I have 2 other questions. So one is to the point of it being the kindergarten enrollment is very volatile. Is there a drop dead date of when we have to accept, and what number do we have to accept by and when, and how does that logistically work?
Yeah, it would come through this particular process. I've actually flagged that this is what we are looking at. So I'm actually flagged. Are we able to participate at that level? And I've been reassured that is the level you can participate should we want to do that. I need to get the exact date of the actual sort of commitment lottery sort of date, but we're well prepared for that going through this particular process. So if we want to do what we have to do now, then we can do that. But I'll get the exact date of the.
Yeah, I think that's critical.
So I
But
guess
we're well in time. This process is, I know this process is well, at least in keeping with the actual timeline.
So something you just said to Mr. Maroney's question, you flag this and we can participate.
Yes.
Is there a minimum? Are we at the minimum in terms of
No,
participating in this
no,
program?
no. You're
Is there a minimum?
No, there's no,
Okay.
there's no minimum.
Or were you done, Mr. Maroney?
Just one,
Sure.
this may be super detailed, but I'm trying to play this out in the future of, you mentioned that transportation is covered, but what happens if a student wants to stay after school for the academic center at Middlesex or participate in athletics at the high school and things like that? Is that transportation included, or how does that work?
So generally speaking, what happened, I haven't confirmed this with CES, so I would need to confirm it, but generally speaking, we would try and work with CES to provide like an after-school bus or something that comes and takes the children. That's why the liaison person is so important in this. But generally, the open choice would actually try and provide that transportation. I need to get it confirmed whether they would or not, but that's generally what would happen.
Thank you, Mr. Maroney.
Duke, you got Tara.
Yes, Mrs.
No, other.
Tara, the other Tara.
Tara and Dave.
Mrs. Worm.
Hi, yes, sorry. So, I know we've gone back and forth and a lot of people have asked these questions. You're talking about that we shouldn't be looking at the finances, but obviously we do need to look at the finances, and that it doesn't really cost the $23,000 we spend per student, right? I know there was support for this last year when it was discussed. I was in support of it last year when it was discussed, but there was very little detail given. I feel like, again, we're really not getting the details. It keeps getting brushed over. So I would really like to see what it's actually going to cost, because we know it doesn't cost $3,000 a student in Darien to educate a student. And I think it is something we need to look at. It's also, this is the idea of bringing it into schools with diminishing enrollment. We do not have diminishing enrollment. So that is something else we need to look at. We are a, highly developed town. And we just keep having more and more development. I think these are all things that need to be looked at. Yes. Is it good for our students? Is it good for other students? Yes. There's a lot of things our students are telling us that we're not listening to, right? The mental health that's going on at the high school, the middle school, elementary school it's off the charts. So the idea that we just keep throwing in new things, there's a ton of new things going on in this budget, and we're not really looking at what's going on with our students. So as much as I would love to help everyone, I think our first focus is our students. So I would like to see a more detail about what this would cost us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Worm.
Dave.
Mr. Brown?
I'm just looking forward to seeing the numbers from Rich, as Jill requested earlier. And I would also echo what I've heard from Mr. Sini and from Mrs. Worm, that, I really think instead of just adding on new things, we really need to look at what we're doing right or need to be doing here in town first. So look forward to having that discussion as a policy issue, not as a budget issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Go
ahead, Al.
No, just a casual comment back. I would hope the board would feel that money aside, so to speak, and certainly we'll try and quantify as best we can. Okay, but it's not anywhere near what we're talking about here. Materials and so on and so forth. It's like $1,300 for these kids. But I hope the board feels that we've had 2 years of discussion of this, which is fine. But we've also had a detailed CES came to discuss too. All right, the finances, if you have a question here and there, but finances sounds like that's a big thing. It's not a big thing in this, but we'll quantify it as best we can. But I think we have had those precursors, right? And lead up to this. But anyway.
Mrs. Parent.
Thank you. And I thank you, Dr. Adley, for reminding that CES did come, and we did have a big presentation about open choice and how it is just the parameters around it. But I'm just want some more clarification about the students that are chosen to be a part of this program. I think that there's been some discussion that maybe Norfolk would send us their most expensive students so that we could educate them instead of that. How can you, is that true? Is that accurate? Is that not accurate? How are these children chosen? And is there an IEP attached to every student that would join us?
It's a straight lottery. Now, I will say again, and full transparency, have I ever said to work with CREC or other organizations who are participating and going, right, we need a balance here, right? And make sure that we're equal representation in some capacity in that. But it's really a lottery. I mean, that's I'm not sure. So if we get special education, I would hope that we wouldn't, or think we might not get all special education students per se, but if we do, we do. But it's a lottery.
Thank you.
Starting at kindergarten level too. Mr. Sini.
So I want to reiterate, I love the concept. Okay, I think we all made that very clear. But we have we serve constituents, and those are taxpayers. Some are school parents, some aren't. And so, to just echo, we do need to know the best estimates. I was taken back by the number of students. We never really discussed the number of students. So I would really be interesting if we can do this at 4, 8, or 16. Knowing the dates is critical, because if we have budget control in our budget, and now we're filling empty spots. So it's almost like a paradox or contradiction if we're adding students to empty seats and then we trip into a new class. So we have to make sure that we prioritize in residence before we hit budget control, and then we can fill open choice. So I think that timing is really, really important, and where we distribute the students. So, I'm just following up though, but I've used the example of open choice being much like inclusionary zoning. And that did over years on the zoning side come under scrutiny because it's bringing affordable apartments into town. I think from a grander scheme, I'm in total agreement with you. It sheds great light on the community, but we really need to know the impacts before we go forth with this. And those discussions we had were very broad, very high level. And we've never had a policy discussion. And again, we find ourselves in a policy discussion in the crux of in a complex one, in the crux of budget season. So shame on me for not pushing that forward.
Thank
earlier.
you, Mr. Sini. Mrs. McCammon?
I think to the point made earlier, there is a bigger discussion about how we best prioritize for everybody. I think to Tara Auckland's point, you can always put a program like this off. And I don't think that's where this board wants to be. We have supported, again, this very conceptually. At the same time, I do think taking open choice for the moment off the table and putting it with all our new programs. We're going to have to decide to a certain extent. You've gone through that work to say, what do you think our school year should look like this year? And you very nicely laid out the 5 goals for, how you went into the fiscal year 23. That number 3, addressing current needs, is more complicated right now than it has been historically. We don't know what we're looking at from a remediation perspective in a number of areas. So I think what would bring me the most comfort is, yes, we need more detail on open choice, but really more than anything, that by the end of this budget cycle or our portion of it, I want to know that operationally you all can manage, and that from a student perspective, we can handle the needs of our students. Again, there is a certain amount that's unknown. So I'm just looking for us to understand that we're trying to balance those 5 goals, and that it's a tricky process, and that's more where this discussion is. How are we going to balance the various inputs at this time?
Mrs. McCammon. Mrs. Ackman.
So I feel like we have to put things in a serious guidance direction, right? Like we accepted the fact that we were on point with it, and we didn't need to put it.
Microphone, please, Tara.
Oh, thanks, Dave. We accepted the idea that we didn't have significant remediation needs, and that we didn't need to budget for COVID or a changing world. And now we're saying we can't make plans for the future because there might be a changing world because of COVID. I mean, we can't have it both ways. I would also suggest that if the board chooses to move forward with this, then we're never going to have the perfect scenario of the lotteries this date. What happens? Because we could have a family of 6 kids move in. We are saying that what we would accept is some number currently proposed is 16. 16 students factored into our enrollment, not other students, Darien Public Schools students, 16. Because we have it happen all the time. We saw it at Oxbridge 2 years ago. They had sections breaks and we had set sections and we said to parents, I know you're over class size guidance, but this is where we are and this is what we've got. So I think if we're going to make a decision about this, we have to look at it as we are willing to accept whatever number we decide on. And we are just factoring that number into our enrollment. And that can be tough, but that will kind of settle, well, what if, you know, we get 2 kids right before the lottery, or we get 6 kids right after the lottery that move into Darien as a residence. The other thing I would say is I lost my train of thought. So I don't know what I would just, but it was there. It'll come back probably.
Thank
But
you,
we'll
Mrs.
talk about this again, I'm sure. But I will say this. I think we have to decide whether we believe in the merits of the program, that they will meet, that they will help enhance the Darien learning experience. That's our job. Our job is education with a responsible budget. And then we go through 2 other bodies who decide whether taxpayers are willing to pay for what we put forward. So, but our job, and we are the only step in the process that looks at the education for kids. The last thing, Dr. Adley, if you could just talk to, in these emails we are getting is, they're saying that services could be taken from Darien students. Do you see that participating in open choice would take services away from Darien children?
I have no idea what that refers to. If someone would like to tell me what that is, I can respond to it, but I just see it that it's enriching the experience and opportunities, but if anyone wants to be specific about that, I'll certainly be responsive.
Thank you.
I can interpret it. Maybe I didn't write it, but it's, you have limited resources and a greater pool of students needing them. But sorry, I jumped in.
Go ahead, Mr. C.
I have a very big philosophical difference of what our role is. I mean, I get elected by constituents broadly, both parents and taxpayers. So yes, I want to be part of it, enriching our students, but I also have to be responsible for that. I just wanted to, we have a different philosophical.
No, I'm not saying,
position.
well, let me be clear that
Okay.
I'm not saying we're not responsible.
Okay.
We have to put forward a responsible budget, but we're the only body in town that has to weigh the educational needs statutorily.
Absolutely.
So what I'm saying is, do we see this as an educational need? Because the Board of Finance isn't responsible for doing that. They have a lane, and the RTM isn't responsible for doing that. We have a hybrid of educational. So let me be clear, I am responsible to our taxpayers, but I have the added responsibility of weighing the educational need.
Agreed.
So if someone were to say, for instance, well, there must be, Dr. Addy, because look, if you've got 14 kids in a class and you put another one in the class, that's 15, that's less time for everybody else. Well, okay, then that's a price we're willing to pay. I mean, if it's going to get down to that.
But that's what price we're willing to pay when we build apartments.
Correct.
or homes or-
Correct.
But also legally, once services are established, services have to be delivered. So whether the services are for our existing school children or the new school children that join the district, you're not going to take away from one to add to the other. It's just not logical.
I guess that's where I'm saying we have to decide whether we're willing to accept whatever number we land on. We're just accepting those as Darien students.
Dr. Ellie, do you know at a high level, I know it's early, I've read some stuff about other districts. Where are some other of our peer districts in participating in this? And I will back that up by saying Dr. Adling and I participated in a legislative meeting with other board chairs and other superintendents. Everyone like us is very excited about the program and the ability of it to come down to this part of the state. It's something that Hartford is looking at. The whole regionalization thing is really not part of this conversation, and it's a fear factor to throw that word into this discussion around open choice. But the way I also look at this too, and I think talking to Mrs. McCammon, she used the word, this is something that we control as a district in terms of how we participate in it and being part of it. And you know, in listening to the legislators and other speakers out of Hartford, you know, the other thing we have to think about is if we're not going to participate in it, we have to come up with some good reasons why we're not going to participate in it and how that's viewed outside of our little world here.
So any of the new districts who are considering participating with Norwalk are probably, well, not probably, they are going through the same thing. And Honestly, from a distance, I see a wee bit of stand back and a wee bit of resistance to it. That's what I'm seeing. I think that the districts that are concerned are probably looking at potentially up to about 2 students each. There's no magic number in that, but I think they're probably facing the same types of discussions and perhaps the same type of, well, I won't call it pushback in some ways, but because it's a discussion, but the same type of issues are on the table in those districts.
I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead,
Real quick.
Mr.
I
Sini.
mean, again, when we started this discussion, we were expecting declining populations. I mean, so that's what's going through my mind. That has changed. And so that's why I'm looking at the numbers and being a little more defensive about my posture on this. 2, when we approve apartments, they actually add to our grand list. So that's a tax base that helps pay for our schools. This is vastly different than that. So I just want to make that clear.
So to that point, you're right, it improves our tax base, which is the goal, right? As a town, we have a goal. We can grant residents be heard or well funded.
Tara, sorry, microphone again.
Sorry, Dave, I'm so used to it always being on. So what I was saying is, you're right, John, when we build apartments and it adds to the grand list, that adds to the goal of increasing our tax base, right? Just like we're seeing downtown, when we support commercial business, it adds to our business tax base. As a board, we need to decide what is our goal. If our goal is to help expose even our children and have them benefit from a more racially diverse experience during their younger years, then we have to take the steps to achieve that goal. This is not a financial game. So I completely agree with you, Mr. Sini. In that case, we met our goal. As a Board of Education, we need to decide, is this our goal and are we willing to meet it?
Thank you, Mrs. Hoffman. I want to make sure, do I see Mr. Brown or Mrs. Worm? Are we good?
Good,
Mrs. Best.
Thank you. As we move forward in this discussion, I think it would be helpful if we can try to figure out ways to dimensionalize what the benefits will look like. And I don't know if that's looking at similar programs in other districts, things in our town that are kind of, you mentioned ABC, if there are ways to get a better understanding of the benefits that that program has brought to the town of Darien, because I think we are going to have to identify what the threshold is. This isn't going to be an argument, I think, that can get settled based on numbers and facts and figures. So it's going to become a question of getting a better understanding of what the cost might be, but then deciding if that's a cost that we think is plays out in a value equation. So just a thought for,
Thank you,
I'm
Mrs.
sure,
Best.
further discussions on this.
Cost benefit.
All right. Dr. Adley and team, are you understanding some of the feedback that the board is looking for in terms of doing some modeling and understanding the cost a little better? And then I think as a board, we have to have a further conversation of teeing this up from a goal and objective standpoint in terms of what we want to do on a go forward basis. I'd love to continue to learn, and we'll read or whatever you can bring to the table, Dr. Adley, in terms of what other districts are doing, because I think that's important also. Anything else, Mr. Maroney?
It just kind of an oddball question here, but for years, we've heard that the middle school is large and it's a large population. And is there a maximum number that the middle school can handle as a total population? Because if we're going to add 1 student per elementary section every year, you're talking about adding 50 to 60 kids to the middle school population in 5 or 6 years. Is that sustainable?
But just to clarify too, I think we keep going back to this. We're not necessarily adding every year in this program will be looked at every year. So if we take 16 kids this year, we may take no kids next year. So that's where sometimes the modeling becomes tough, but it's just something we should all make sure we understand. Mrs. Achman.
We brought CES. I'm just going to leave it on.
Uh-oh.
We brought CES here one night. And it was a busy meeting, but no one really had questions for them.
Yeah.
And so I feel like right, wrong, or indifferent, now's where we have questions. Maybe we can bring them back for a budget meeting because some of these questions about how it runs, I feel like I could argue both. I could argue to Mr. Sini's point, maybe shame on us. We should have pushed more and maybe we need a little more information. But no one asked them questions when they were here last time, so maybe we just bring them back and say
I
now
think-
that
I
it's
think it
on
was
the
11:15 at night.
Yeah.
No, I agree, right? But no one did, and so now we have some of these questions, so maybe they're a valued resource to bring back during a budget meeting one time. Or maybe we could collect the questions beforehand. I don't know, and send it to
Or bring them back
CES.
at a special meeting perhaps or something?
Yeah.
Sorry. I mean,
There's a lot of
So, yeah.
special meetings.
well, but listen,
Let's
this
just-
is huge.
Let's
I
just,
agree.
we'll book January.
But maybe, because, I mean, we had the resource,
Yeah.
it was late, but
No, if I kind of recap what I'm hearing and then take into account the feedback from our community and from parents, I think if we go back in time when it was done, you know, it worked for the schedule and it was a preview, but that's the one thing that's come to my mind is let's add this to an agenda or have a special meeting, bring them back in, understand some of the questions that have come out from the board today. We'll get some other questions from our friends on Zoom and you know, what I want to do is as people ask questions too, if there's some of the same questions that we've already asked, I don't think we need those questions asked again, but if you could submit and make sure you organize your thoughts and get those questions submitted into us so we can look at all the questions as we're, you know, trying to stay on some type of schedule for this meeting, but we want to make sure we get all the questions and all the concerns from the community members also. But I do think, Mrs. Achman, that makes sense. Maybe dust off the presentation, see if we can have some time with the folks from CES, and I think that would help. All right, good. All right. So now we'll move over to our partners. What I would suggest is as we go through each partner, why don't we start out with any questions pertaining to the elementary schools other than open choice? We'll get those done, and then we'll get into specifics from you about open choice. If we could go in that order, I think that would help. So I'll turn it over to anyone from the Board of Finance.
Not on
Taylor.
anything other than open choice.
Yeah, same thing with me.
You're more open choice.
Yeah,
All right,
more
so
on the open
go.
choice.
If you, Board of Finance, if you have nothing specific to the elementary schools other than open choice, then go ahead with your questions on open choice. Go ahead, Taylor.
Okay, I think Rob wanted to go first. Rob, do you want to start?
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll go first. Sorry, I think, Duke, you actually wrapped it up pretty well at the last thing you said about the open choice. To be really frank, I was a little bit disappointed that this topic is actually only covered in one paragraph. So for folks that may not know about open choice, how it works, how it's going to work, once again, I think we need a special meeting or a little bit more verbiage. I look at the thing as two different ways. There's a financial aspect to it and there's an operational aspect to it, right? I'd like to see as much detail as we could on that. Dr. Adley, I'm not sure if that's your group that could put that together, but the more that you could show, I think the better off it is. I think most people are visual, so if they can look at it, they can make comments on it and maybe other questions come out. But I think that's where we are with this, especially for an issue that obviously is pretty paramount for, I think, a lot of parents in this town.
So Rob, thank you. I appreciate you keeping it at a high level. I think one thing that would help, as the presentation was a while ago, we'll get the information from that presentation out to all of you to share, knowing that it will be updated and we'll get additional questions as we go through this process, and we'll look for that meeting with CES and to cover this more in depth. So I appreciate you keeping it at a high level like that. Taylor.
Thanks, Duke.
Yeah, thanks. You know, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say that I actually do support this effort. I think it's, from a principal level, I think it's great. I think every child should have access to a great education, and we offer one of the best in the area. And I think, you know, this program is designed to alleviate some enrollment problems we have in the state where urban centers are kind of bursting at the seams and other districts aren't. I appreciate that we are looking at not breaking class sections. And as we think about how many kids to accept, I think that's a reasonable way to do this. I do want to, though, better understand the costs associated. So how did we come up with the $2,240 per elementary school? That's $560 per child, if I've done that right. Are there any special ed expenses included in the cost or in the anticipated incoming class of 16 students? And then I'll admit, I don't understand how ECR reimbursement will work with this program. It seems terribly confusing about it. If it's our rate or it's another rate, or I'd love to know more about that. If someone can point me in the direction of learning more, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks, Taylor. And I appreciate you specific on the sharing and the costs on special ed. So that'll have to be a line item too. We will move on
You
to,
get a couple other, you got Hendrickson and Palin.
okay, from
Board of Finance.
Board of Finance. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Palin.
Hey, Duke, it's Jim. So on the open choice thing, what I would like to see, and I think would be helpful
You
for
could
us.
speak a little louder, Jim. Thanks.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. What I would like to see as we kind of think about like what the long-term effects of this program would be is a sort of pro forma layout that shows what the projection of the student population would be over 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 years, and what the relative costs of that program would be over that same time period. So we can think about as a board, sort of what the long-term budget implications are of a program like this. I think it's interesting to look at what the effect would be next year, but I think we really need to think about sort of long-term costs of this program. And so if we could see it sort of layered in incrementally, almost in a bridge type format versus where we are today, I think that would be helpful for the Board of Finance in understanding the long-term effects of this.
Thanks, Jim. I'm looking for Paul Hendrickson.
I'm right there.
Hey, Paul.
Hi. As an administrator in another district that has open choice, we've had no problems. As indicated, most of the costs calculated into your PPE are already fixed. And this is only incremental costs, provided you don't break any sections. So the out-of-pocket cost to educate these children would probably be a couple thousand, which would be less than what you would be getting from the state. So that's the only point I have to make.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that as having participated in it. Anyone else from the Board of Finance?
Hey, Duke, one last question. Sorry, it's Rob again.
Rob.
Oh God, now I've lost my train of thought. I just had something. Oh, I'd be really curious also, and I think somebody talked about this, how people are chosen for the program.
It is a lottery. It is a lottery, but we'll get more details on that.
Super. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. All right, looks like we're good with Board of Finance. We will move on to RT F&B, Jack Davis.
Hi. I hate to bring this up because it's definitely not going to move the mill rate, but back to the elementary schools.
Yes.
On the line item for professional development, it appears that each of them are moving up by $65, even though it doesn't look like there's any additional teachers. So is that for the APs that we added this year? And if it is, why wasn't it adjusted into this year's budget? So that's one question. The second one is on all of the part 1, part 2 textbooks and consumables. When was the last time we looked at it? But not only looking at it, when are we deciding whether or not what we are requesting or using is still relevant to the curriculum and whether or not modifications can be done? On the open choice, one question that we do have is, even though it shouldn't be an us versus them, is there planned professional development associated with bringing children in? And lastly, a quick anecdotal is my 32-year-old ended up going to Ox Ridge. First day of school, she came back. We asked how school was. She said, something's wrong with our school. We asked her what, and she said, everyone looks exactly like me, because she went to a diversified preschool. So that's something to consider when we're looking at open choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Anyone else? Anyone else from F&B? Are we good, Jack? We're good. RTM Education, Ed.
Yeah, one question outside of open choice, was the custodial FTE considered, planned for when we were planning for the Oxbridge rebuild, or is this kind of a surprise or something that was unplanned? And then with respect to the open choice questions, we will send you all this, but there are a lot of folks on the committee who have sort of put things in here. There are a few points, a few that I just want to raise because I don't think they've been raised so far. So most of the questions here, around money. Couple of others. Has there been any engagement with students about this program? Meaning, did leaders at the high school have an opinion on the benefits of such a program, realizing it would be many years before these students ever enter high school? Has there been engagement with teachers in the elementary school, at sort of a lower level? Perhaps when you are presenting how open choice would work, you might present the comparison to the ABC house, in particular, how that was rolled out. As I understand it from someone on the committee who's going to speak a little bit later, the ABC costs are funded by the district, and I don't know if we've had such debates in the past, but again, maybe there are differences. And then with respect to money, once we sort of figure out what our costs will be, are we allowed, I'm putting that, in air quotes, allowed to raise money to support this program, similar to how we have raised money to support other gifts, improvements, team items, etc.
Thanks, Ed. We will move on to CDSP. Again, anything? Okay, nothing specific to the elementary schools and nothing open choice. Great, thank you. Your questions have been asked. I appreciate that. That's the best way to look at it. My questions have been asked. Thank you. We'll move on to CPAC.
Hi, it's Jamie Zionic with CPAC.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi. We just have two quick questions. Starting my video. Jack Davis touched on this, but are all of the expenses for the new elementary assistant principals in RC 24, including professional development? And then the second question is, how is the ratio determined for the instructional paraprofessionals? I see it's 1 to 80, between 1 to 80 and 1 to 89. That's all we have. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. Okay, I will open it up. Michelle, I see you're capturing hands there, so I'll open it up to the public.
Would you like to start in Zoom land or in person?
Anyone in person? No, we're good in person, so we'll go to Zoom land.
Miss Teresa Vogt, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, Teresa. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Good.
Not going to start my video because I haven't gotten dressed yet. Teresa Vogt. Teresa Vogt. I know you don't need my address, my circle vote. I'm actually speaking not as a member of the RTM Education Committee right now, but as a volunteer with the ABC program. I'm actually one of the few volunteers who has a child at the high school, so I am often asked for some feedback, and the girls are very open with me about some of their experiences at the high school. And one of the questions posed this year was, are the ABC girls safe in the Darien community? Think about that. Right now, we are asking if these girls are safe in our community, and should we eliminate the ABC program because of that? There are things that you just cannot put a cost to because the benefit outweighs that cost. The open choice program will diversify our community in a way that hopefully over time, minority children who come to our district feel safe. Not everything is a cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, I'll let you pick the next hand.
Username Susie, you are unmuted and recognized.
Can you hear us, Susie? There you go.
Yes. Good morning. Happy New Year. It's Susie Flaherty, 6 Lake Drive. First of all, I want to say how incredibly impressed and proud I am to watch our Board of Education talk about open choice and whether or not our children need it, or can we afford it, or what does affording something really mean in terms of the benefits of our students. I I'm just so happy to have you all there to represent us, because as I'm watching, I'm thinking, oh, I agree with that. Oh, but I agree with that too. So the only thing I wanted to say was that after some of the marketing material came out last week about open choice against it, I started doing my own research, and I did a lot of reading about how a more diverse classroom cognitively benefits all students, and that they become higher thinking individuals. And I just wanted to put that out there because it's something that will help all of us and all of our children as they move through the school system. And then I was just thinking about the question about whether or not teachers will be trained or educated on how to handle a more diverse classroom. And I think that will be addressed by the DEI training that they will receive as a part of our DEI program that hopefully will be initiated soon. That's really all I had to say, but thank you so much. Really, I really appreciate all of your hard work and your thoughtfulness.
Thank you very much. Next hand, Michelle.
Peter McGinnis, you are unmuted and recognized.
Can you hear us, Peter? You look like you're still muted, Peter. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you
Good,
hear
we
me?
can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you all for having this conversation. And also, I would endorse a special meeting. Unfortunately, I don't think the robustness of the conversation can be had at a budget meeting. I'm leaning also on many years ago, taking a cost accounting class. And I just want to draw a parallel here because I think this is at least on the economics part, what we are wrestling with. When we think about 20 empty spots in a movie theater, where the 20 seats would be empty anyway, the manager of that movie theater might allow everyone to come in for free to fill those 20 spots because he's hoping or she's hoping for sales in the concession stand. Another way to look at it, so that's where your marginal cost per seat filled is actually zero, and you'd be willing to take $1. On the other hand, if you're running a restaurant and your menu price is $20 for the meal, and you have 3 or 4 waiters and fine china and tablecloth service, just an analogy, and you go into an agreement with someone to compensate you $3 for that $20 meal and commit to a 13-year period where you would just take a flat reimbursement, that's a very different scenario. So I don't think anyone here really has a handle on what variable costs are. And also, I don't think, frankly, there's a sense of how much that will increase. We run a 3-4% increase per year. The future costs are substantial. One more thing to add, some people have been talking about ECS, educational cost sharing. Last time I looked in the budget, it was around $460,000 for the Darien district. That's less than $100 per head. So we're not getting any funding from the state on that basis. And then finally, one thing I just ask you to consider is what Norwalk has a significant number of ELL students, English language learning students. What if we end up with a student that speaks Spanish only, recent immigrant, or maybe Portuguese? What are the additional costs associated with that? So I do think robustness around this needs to be applied, particularly when we look at what is this long range going to cost the town, and especially in light of all the construction going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Next hand, Michelle.
Ms. Stacy TA, you are unmuted and recognized.
Thank you. I just want to clarify them speaking as an individual. As a community, open choice is not a burden, but actually an enhancement for our district. We want our students, we want to make sure our students have an opportunity to expand their worldview and to be able to go beyond the Darien bubble. I can't help but think if we had open choice in the past, many of the problems we've seen at the middle school and high school would not be occurring today. We all would like to think that the instances we have had are due to ignorance rather than intentional bigotry. So why wouldn't we want to take the opportunity to address that ignorance through organic friendships and relationships for our children? Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey.
Miss Abigail Hornstein, you are unmuted and recognized.
Abigail, can you hear us?
Yeah, yes, I can. Have I been unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Fantastic. So I want to continue the comments of the last two speakers. The first of the last two spoke about the economics, and by coincidence, this is the third consecutive day of the American Economic Association's annual meetings, which run from 10 a.m. till about 9:30 p.m. every day, in which the top economists around the world present cutting-edge work. I am, by coincidence, planning to attend a talk at 11 titled The Impact of School Spending on Civic Engagement, Evidence from School Finance Reforms. And this is a study that shows that one of the primary rationales for the public provision of K-12 education and the large role played by state governments is that education fosters not only the development of human capital, but also enhances social capital and civic engagement. Skipping most of the abstract, we're going to cut to the chase. They provide some of the first causal evidence on how exogenous increases in K-12 school spending impact civic engagement. If you actually read the paper, you will find out that targeted increases in educational expenditure, such as would be associated with this open choice plan, provide short and long-term benefits to children in the school system and the surrounding community. In short, the economics strongly refutes what a previous speaker said, and it shows across the country, broken out by different types of school districts, that this would be a stellar investment for the Darien Board of Education. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Abigail.
Miss Jan Raymond, you are unmuted and recognized.
Jan, can you hear us? Jan, you're not, you seem to be frozen or unmuted. Can you hear us? Jan,
Okay.
you're not, okay, go ahead.
Hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring up the point that when we started ABC in Darien, I was one of the early board members. And the same kind of discussion occurred around whether or not we should be bringing ABC girls into the town and into the program. As probably you all know, the fast forward to a few years ago, 10 or 15 years ago, ABC decided there were not enough girls. Darien decided there were not enough girls. ABC bought a house and increased the number of girls that are in the program. And I think ABC is an example of when making decisions like this, we are going to be paid off multiple times in terms of the benefits to the school system, and I would say to the entire community. So that's my point, and I just want to add that I'm speaking as an individual, not as a member of the Education Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. You got Jackie Miller.
Miss Jackie Miller, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, my name is Jackie Miller and I live at 84 Fitch Avenue. I just wanted to express my support for the Open Choice program. I think as a community, we've been talking about ways to increase our diversity, and this is a wonderful program to do that. And because of the benefits for our students, I think it's wrong to look just at the cost of the pupils who will be attending, because we're really reaping benefits for so many of our students who have an opportunity to live outside see life outside the Darien bubble. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jackie. Any other hands?
There are no more raised hands at this time.
Great. Well, I just want to thank everyone from the board perspective, from the administration perspective, from our partners and the community. It's a good conversation. We have to have the conversation. We have to have all the facts out on the table. So appreciate everyone's input across the spectrum. I think it's important. I think we understand our takeaways to continue to look at this program and how a program like this could work in Darien. So we'll do that. So thank you. We are
Hey,
a
Jeff,
little,
There was one.
excuse me, Mr.
I'm
Senior. Go
sorry
ahead.
about that.
No,
There was
go
one
ahead.
point about safety brought up. Are we seeing any safety issues with ABC or?
I'm not,
Okay.
I'm not aware.
Maybe
of-
if you
aware
could
of that.
follow up on that, sir.
I'm not
Thank
aware
you.
of safety
Thank
issues.
you, Mr. Sini. We are a little bit behind.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just
Go ahead.
say maybe just in relation to just the topics that have been on the table that have impacted that community as well, right?
Okay,
Both
understood.
both as
Yeah.
as in the student body and but it will obviously with translation over to ABC, but so nothing other than that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Also, thank you. I see all the shining faces of our elementary school principals, and thank you all for all your hard work. Thanks for participating. You chose a good person in having Luke speak for you all. We should mix that up and give each of you a turn as we go through the budget process, right? But thank you all for taking your Saturday morning with us. Much appreciated.
Thank you, folks. Thanks very much.
We are a little behind schedule. We are scheduled right now after the elementary schools for a 10-minute break. So we'll probably take at least 5, maybe a few minutes more, and we'll get back here as soon as possible to continue the discussion. So we will go into a break right now. Thank you.